Well, ladies and gentlemen, it's another day in Retard Dunistan, and as per usual, let's look at the retarded news. But before we do, can you yet again remind you, if you haven't already, subscribe to that channel. So let's start off by looking at the South African news, of which there's plenty. So the first is that SOC has actually beat BEE. Yep, they've actually beat BEE requirements in relation to international airlines operating in South Africa. Now, for context, foreign airlines from the US and Europe were being subjected to race-based BEE licensing conditions similar to DEI policies according to sarcastically. Now, these race-based aviation licenses were dating back to 2023, and this was initially believed to apply only to domestic air services. Now, after sarcastically launched an investigation, foreign embassies alerted sarcastically that the international carriers were also being affected. So sarcastically sued the Airline Licensing Council, that's the ASLC, over race-based licensing of local airlines, and in August 2025, the court ruled that it was unlawful to subject domestic airlines to BEE or race-based criteria. Now, in October 2025, sarcastically launched a similar case against the International Air Services Council, that's the IASC, and the regulator has now withdrawn its opposition, paving the way for an unopposed court order. Now, sarcastically argues that the IASC has no legal authority to impose BEE on international airlines. So, licensing, according to sarcastically, should only be based on operational capacity, safety standards, residency requirements, and prudent control requirements. Now, this itself is being hailed as a big win against third wave BEE. That's the imposition of BEE via the licensing criteria. Do let me know what you think of that in the comments section below. Now, moving from BEE, let's move to our much-loved NHI, because AfriForum has announced today, that's the time of recording, that they have served legal summons on the President, Cyril Ramaphosa, and the Health Minister, Moron, to challenge the constitutionality of the NHI, that's the National Health Insurance Act. Now, the announcement was made at a media conference held at Kempton Park Hospital, which, for those of you who don't know, is classed as a ghost hospital. It's not a real hospital, effectively, which AfriForum says highlights the risks to the health system if NHI is actually implemented. And we're going to get more of these ghost hospitals and less actual services. Now, this particular legal action is said to be the first action proceeding against NHI, meaning that it may involve formal court evidence like expert testimony. Now, AfriForum's main constitutional objectives include the dilution of provincial government powers, restriction of patients' choice, limits to clinical independence of healthcare professionals, and the economic unworkability or lack of rationality of the NHI framework. Now, the organization says that the Act doesn't just affect its members' rights, but the rights of the broader public. And AfriForum argues that the NHI is driven by ideological and not practical healthcare improvement, and warns that it could cost taxpayers heavily, estimated at around 10% of GDP, without delivering any form of effective service. Now, for those of you in the know, we all know what NHI will be. It will effectively be a looting epidemic of the centralized fund. So with that in mind, let's move on to the responses given yesterday in Parliament to the SONA address that Ramaphosa gave. Let's start off with the most important address given yesterday in Parliament, and that was the address given by Ian Cameron. I'm not a massive DA fan, but I'm a huge Ian Cameron fan. And Ian Cameron addressed the idea that Cyril Ramaphosa suggested that he would fast-track gun controls in South Africa, and Ian Cameron had the following to say.
Then, honourable members, there was one last commentary suggesting tighter controls on lawful firearm ownership. And let's be clear, law-abiding licensed firearm owners are not the drivers of organised crime. Criminal syndicates are armed through illicit trafficking, diversion and corruption, and they are very rarely lawful owners of firearms. Disarming the compliant while illegal firearms flood our communities is neither rational nor just, and lawfully armed citizens are assets to communities. They are responsible individuals who comply with the law while protecting themselves and their families. We will fight any attempt to disarm law-abiding citizens while illegal firearms continue to flood our communities. In
Ian's not wrong. Ian is 100% correct, and you can see Cyril Ramaphosa watching him, address him directly, and one has to ask the fundamental question of what's going through the president's mind. Now, the next person to address Cyril Ramaphosa was actually the Freedom Front Plus's leader, Corne Mulder, who said that Afrikaners are willing to help fix South Africa, but only if they are treated with equality and recognition. He says that unresolved self-determination issues and broken agreements with the state have led to Afrikaner anger and complete distrust in the state itself. In fact, you can watch what Corne Mulder had to say right here.
Lastly, I want to also speak about the Afrikaner and the unresolved issues between us. Afrikaners and other minorities appreciate the efforts that you are making to solve South Africa's problems. We really do notice it. However, alone you will not succeed. The cabinet and all of your task teams will also not succeed. And also, not even the public service will succeed. It will be a major collaborative effort from everyone in South Africa, political leaders, civil society, and every South African in this country that needs to do this. Then only do we stand a chance. Here is my hand, Mr. President. Today, the Afrikaner and other minorities are extending a helping hand to you. We want to help, but it's not unconditional. We request equal treatment and recognition. It doesn't help if we say we will not be free as long as the people of Palestine and Western Sahara are not free. But with no consequence, as in your own country, an Afrikaner community does not even have the right to determine the language of instruction in their school. We are also not allowed to decide and determine shareholding in our own businesses and companies. That is not freedom. Today I have once again given you a copy of the Accord on Afrikaner Self-Determination. Afrikaner freedom and self-determination are unresolved issues that will not go away. Let us deal with it. In the past, the Freedom Front Plus has honored our agreements. Look at our history. But the ANC has not. That leads to Afrikaner anger and reaction. Two examples. The FF Plus honored our part in the agreement regarding the Northern Cape. After the election, the ANC blatantly violated it. This makes us angry and a serious breach of trust. The agreements reached concerning the Bella Act and expropriation without compensation were also violated. That makes Afrikaners draw their hands back. But let us look one another in the eye now and address these issues.
Now, not to be outdone by all of this, Julius Malema also had an address where he said that it was ironic for Ramaphosa to announce new crime-fighting plans, whilst in his view the ANC was in itself the biggest crime syndicate in the country. Now, Malema said that the deployment of the army to fight crime in Gauteng and other provinces is an admission that the police have failed underneath the ANC's leadership. And he accused the ANC of factionalizing law enforcement and intelligence services, which had weakened the criminal justice system. Malema warned that the army alone cannot solve the crime crisis and urged addressing underlying social problems such as unemployment, substance abuse, and school dropout rates. On economics, he criticized the government for failing to grow the economy or strengthen the currency, noting that the past promises of a 3% growth just haven't materialized. I mean, this is unfortunately the case of many of Cyril Ramaphosa's promises. Now, interesting enough, while saying all of that about growing the economy, he then said that the president had auctioned off key aspects of the country, such as ports, railway, and energy capabilities, to the private sector, and that effectively he was now also doing that to water, which meant that the president had effectively sold the country out. In fact, have a watch.
We warned you 8 years ago that the Oppenheimers and the Ruperts will neutralize you, and your legacy will be that you auctioned our country and its strategic asset to the highest bidder. You did not heed our warning. You have auctioned our sovereignty to asset management companies such as BlackRock, which is why you have praised for the growth of the JSE. You auctioned our country by selling our ports, our railway, our energy generation capacity to the private sector. And now you want to do same with water. You do not take responsibility for creating jobs. You do not take responsibility for fighting crime. You do not take responsibility for infrastructure development. And you do not take responsibility for growing our economy. There is no sign of any infrastructure of a bullet train, that there are no design plans of a smart city, and there is not even a curriculum for an institution of higher learning in Ikuruleni, as you have promised. You asked us to send you to Mamina, and we made a mistake, we send you. And as your term of office come to an end, you have nothing to show for it.
But you see, Julius doesn't seem to yet again understand how actual free market enterprise works. How do you actually grow an economy and how do you actually employ people? And it's certainly not through a tax-based funded system such as anything that's centralized in the control of the government or the purveyance of the government. Now, Athol Trollip also addressed the SONA and suggested that the president continues to pay lip service to illegal immigration and illicit trade. This is one of the key policies of ActionSA, the idea that we should basically kick out the foreigners. I mean, this also happens to be a key policy of the Patriotic Alliance, but anyway, this is what Athol had to say.
You said that we must avoid international trade where might is right, yet you choose to align with autocratic, despotic regimes across the globe where might is the only fair, and in so doing you alienate our trade partners from the democratic free world. You are recklessly navigating the new world without a moral compass at our collective peril. Mr. President, you continue to pay lip service to stopping illegal immigration and illicit trade, which goes hand in hand. My colleague, Honourable Alan Beasley, bought cigarettes and alcohol within one block of this precinct at a fraction of the price of the regulated products. As long as politicians and political parties benefit from the situation, nothing will change, despite the fact that these products compromises the health of South African citizens and destroy their access to employment, not to mention lost tax revenues. You said that corrupt criminals will face consequences, yet you yourself face no consequences for the illicit possession and foreign currency to the value of $580,000. What's more, you failed to report the theft of this contraband to the South African Police Services. The silence from your party and your GNU partners on this stinks of the worst kind of expediency. As for expediency, why are Deputy President, it's not my house, actually it is my house, Mashatile, Zweli Mkhize of Digital Vibes infamy, and Tembi Semelani of VBS notoriety not charged and prosecuted? Lifestyle audits, my foot. Even the MPA officials have refused lifestyle audits, and it's clear as to why they do that if you watch the Madlanga Commission and Ad Hoc Committee on our TV screens daily. No, Mr. President, you cannot fictionalize your legacy. It isn't shaped by spin but by facts. You are right about your government and your bloated cabinet of ministers promoted above the Peter Principle, lurching from one crisis to another.
So, ladies and gentlemen, do let me know what you think of all of the SONA responses in the comment section below. I mean, as per usual, many of them were self-explanatory, but rather interesting to hear Ian Cameron, because Ian Cameron was the one who was the most direct in saying that he would directly challenge the government in terms of their firearms control. And for that, I say, Ian Cameron remains South Africa's greatest hero and our greatest advocate for freedom in the country. So let's actually move on to the UK. You'll notice that today I switched UK news to the end, not the beginning. I did that because some individuals asked me to. As per usual, two events are now occurring in the UK simultaneously. You'll know that there'll be Ash Wednesday at the time of recording, and there's also Ramadan. And every year for the last couple of years, well, not like historically, but in the last couple of years, there's been a huge kerfuffle between which of these two holidays wins out, given democratic replacement. Now, you will know that at the moment, this idea that Ramadan is overrepresented in the British establishment, and that Ash Wednesday almost seems to be non-existent, is a constant theme every year around this time. And this comes after GB News highlighted a young boy who had been told to remove his Ash Wednesday mark, which is highlighting the questions yet again of a two-tier system in Britain. In fact, have a watch.
A teacher walked over and said, like, "What is that?" And I was like, "It's Ash Wednesday and I'm Catholic's first day of Lent." And he's like, "No, it's inappropriate, go take it off."
Now, all this at a time when certain sectors of the establishment are all praising and celebrating Ramadan. As an example, Nottingham Police highlighted that Ramadan started today, but failed to mention anything about the country's Christian tradition. The royal family were yet again in the press because individuals yet again noticed that for the second year running, Charles wished everybody a happy Ramadan, but conveniently forgot that Lent had begun on Ash Wednesday, and that as the head of the Church of England, he probably should have said something about that, but inevitably he didn't. Now, the two-tier nature of the system in the UK is again under fire after London banned a Walk for Jesus march in order to avoid provoking the Muslim community. But in a bizarre twist, the Muslim community went out and did a march of their own, praising Islam. In fact, have a watch. Now, some individuals are claiming that this shows just how far the British establishment has gone to appease the occupiers. Now, even more interesting is that news has come out that actually mosques will be used for the purposes of British elections underneath guidelines proposed by the Muslim Council of Britain. And this is asking many individuals a fundamental question. Is this an attempt to capture the British electorate? Here, have a watch yourself.
Your mosque is actually a polling center. So why do you choose to be a polling center when it comes to elections?
Number one, because we are in a prime location, so that makes a big difference. Number two, I think it really breaks down barriers. It opens people's minds to say that a masjid is not just a place where you come, you pray and you leave. It's a place for the community. It's a central hub for Muslims and non-Muslims for whatever need is required. So the fact that we have a big, huge polling station sign outside our masjid, it allows non-Muslims to enter into the mosque for probably the first time in their life. It actually encourages Muslims to vote themselves, because a lot of people from the Muslim community have this preconception, misconception that we shouldn't vote, we don't need to vote, our vote doesn't count, we're so small, we're a minority. They pay the masjid as well, so there's a benefit there.
Now, you may look at that and say, well, what does that actually mean by capturing the British electorate? And some individuals are again noticing that in key areas of the country, that's Britain, key elections are being fought by exclusively Islamic leaders. In fact, have a watch. Now, all of this is leading through forms of local tension, as some Muslim preachers in Britain admits that Islam is at war with the local population. In fact, have a watch.
The reason why you have to fight them is because they are Jews and Christians. You should fight those empires around you, or those hukumat around you, which are Jew or Christian, until they give the jizya. That's fine. That we already know Islam allows. And then the howness of that is in the hadith. The three options that they're given: either you give the jizya, or you do this, or you do that. We're not apologetic about that point.
Now, comments like these are forcing some individuals to reflect on the words that Christopher Hitchens had to say about Britain and resisting the importation of Islam to that country over 20 years ago. In fact, have a watch.
Give it up, or give it to your deadliest enemy and pay for the rope that will choke you. This is very urgent business, ladies and gentlemen. I beseech you. Resist it while you still can, and before the right to complain is taken away from you, which will be the next thing. You will be told you can't complain. because you're Islamophobic. The term is already being introduced into the culture as if it was an accusation of race hatred, for example, or bigotry, whereas it's only the objection to the preachings of a very extreme and absolutist religion. Watch out for these symptoms. They are not just symptoms of surrender, very often ecumenically offered to you by men of God.
Now, ladies and gentlemen, I must admit that in the past couple of days I did actually make a comment about a news article that had come out of the UN which suggested that Zionism was being equated to Judaism and was leading to forms of anti-Semitic behavior. Now, some individuals said, well, that's just completely stupid. Just because you're a Jew doesn't mean that individuals are anti-Zionist to you. And one individual in the comment section said that that would be like saying that all Germans were Nazis. Well, in a bizarre twist, the anti-Zionist movement in Birmingham itself says, and I quote, in Palestine we never say Zionist, we just say Jew. So it would appear that whoever told me that I was talking nonsense is talking nonsense. In fact, have a watch.
In Palestine, we never say Zionists, we say the Jewish. We don't say the Zionists.
We need to be very clear with who we're targeting. As Palestine passed, we've been targeting directly Zionists. Gal Gadot, for example, was filming in London. We didn't allow her. We disrupted her set, 12 of her sets. She lost quite a lot of money and she would regret even thinking about coming to record in London again. And that's the sort of actions we want to take to make them feel uncomfortable and dismantle Zionism also in our spaces here in England.
Now moving swiftly onwards. Well, for those of you who haven't noticed, of recent, Rupert Lowe has launched a manifesto for his new Restore Britain party. And one of the key points highlighted in his manifesto is mass deportations. Now, with that being said, the idea of mass deportations has come into the public fray, with Nigel Farage actually admitting that one of the reasons that him and Rupert Lowe separated in the first place is that Rupert wanted mass deportations, and he said that reform will not deliver that. In fact, have a watch.
But you see, when he stood up and said that we've got to consider the mass deportation of entire communities, including those born in the United Kingdom, that just moves way beyond a point of reasonableness, of decency, of morality. And that was the moment at which, I realised we just had to get rid of him and get rid of him as quickly as we could. And I think in terms of the way we dealt with that, we were probably more brutal than the other parties. But you know what? That's the way it's going to be.
Now, Nigel Farage went further to say that Rupert Lowe's party isn't really going to get much of the vote. In fact, have a watch.
As far as Rupert Lowe is concerned, there will be some polling published later today that shows his recognition factor amongst members of the British public. It is not very high at all. And so a push poll that says 10% is utter rot. The party isn't even registered. He won't be on 1% anywhere, not even probably in Great Yarmouth.
But this is leading many to ask the fundamental question of Nigel, and that is, what does it actually mean to be British, and who is English and who should be deported? And if you ask Nigel these questions, he says, well, it's about how you feel. In fact, have a watch.
Listen, I'm not going to start drawing ethnic lines on what being English is. Otherwise, we'd be back to DNA tests of whether you're Anglo-Saxon. I'm not going down that road. It's about how you feel, and it's about what your priorities are. That's what I'd say. Okay. What are your priorities? What is the thing that you really believe you're part of? And that, I think, is very, very important.
So there you have it. We have Rupert Lowe saying we need mass deportation and we need to get rid of many of the illegal immigrants in the country.
Restore Britain will not just stop mass immigration, we will reverse it. Far more people must leave Britain than arrive. If that means millions go, then millions go.
And Nigel saying, yeah, that's not what he's actually going to do.
So it's a rhetorical problem.
It's a political impossibility to deport hundreds of thousands of people. We simply can't do it.
And this is leading many to question whether or not Nigel Farage's Reform UK really is going to be the party to take over from the Conservatives and the Labour Party, seeing as it appears to have already adopted a current regime stance on immigration. But in any case, ladies and gentlemen, that's the news of today. Do let me know what you think of all these comments in the comment section below. And until next time, bye.